Hey everyone, Troy Eckard here. Just going to touch on a couple of things happening in the last 24 hours. As you've probably seen in the news, the so-called MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the United States and Iran has not really been worth the paper it was written on. Never did suspect it would hold, never did suspect they would keep their end of the bargain, never suspected the MOU was anything more than a delay tactic by President Trump to try to contain oil prices as he heads into the midterms. The truth of the matter is, you can't bargain with a radical group like the Iranians. That religious faction, that ideology is not based on Western civilization uh, protocol. Keeping your word doesn't matter. They have an ideology that they'll go to all lengths to try to protect. So from yesterday to today, we've seen all kinds of action. We've seen tankers shot at. We've seen all kinds of vessels have been attacked in the strait. We've seen the U.S. respond in kind. President Trump's over at NATO right now trying to talk to other world leaders. And what we've seen really the last 3 or 4 weeks is the anticipation, hope by the market that everything is going to be kumbaya and all good. No one wants war. No one wants problematic issues related to not only human life, but also just massive destruction in terms of countries and the citizens that live there. That aside, here's my point. We have a couple of really big things that are taking place behind the scenes that I don't think most of us are paying attention to. Number one, China has moved itself, in my opinion, to being what they consider to be the swing demand player in international crude oil. They have stored up so much oil that they can either buy lack of demand or increase demand, either move the price of oil much, much higher or much, much lower, because they have about 1.2 billion barrels in storage capacity and another 800 and 900 billion barrels that are held in capacity and storage by their two main oil companies. So call it 2 to 2.2 billion barrels of oil. When you get up in the morning and you look at the derivative pricing, which is the expectation of future pricing, and you look at WTI, West Texas price, or Brent, it gives you a range of what's happening today. But if I'm trying to see where I'm going to head, I can't look right in front of my face. I have to look down the road. And the question is, am I looking down the straight part of the road, or does the road have a curve in it? Does it have an angle? Is it a drop or an elevation change? Is it daylight? Is it morning? So the entire world would love to say that oil prices are going to settle into $55 to $70 oil because they need it there. They need crude oil to be there. But if you ask yourself a couple of basic questions, you probably can't find the answer. And the answer is this, or the question, I should say, is this. How many tankers and vessels were trapped on the outbound side of the Strait of Hormuz that's been sitting there for 90 to 120 days, loaded to the hilt, just trying to safely get passage to get out of the strait? Okay, well, let's just assume there was about, and I think the estimate I found was about 600 plus waterborne vessels, 20,000 mariners. That's a lot of people and a lot of tankers sitting on the outbound side of the strait couldn't get through. Now they've been releasing it 10, 20, 25 vessels a day. Takes a long time to unwind that. If you look at the oil tankers, they were estimating about 160 to 180 million barrels of oil that was trapped on the outbound side. If all those vessels move out of the strait, how many vessels are going to move back into the strait until they know that this complete military activity comes to a cease and it's halted? If I were a tanker owner, I'm not sending my tanker back in. I'm not sending my vessel back in. I'm not sending my Aframax back in to pick up oil. Not going to happen. One, it can get shot, blown up, hit a mine, or I've got my crew and my tanker trapped. And as a tanker owner, I'm losing money. That tanker makes money by moving product from A to B. So what the news is not telling you is, although we have a pickup in outbound traffic taking what they've already been loaded in terms of product goods coming and crude oil coming out of the strait, how many vessels are going back in? Very, very few, if any. And is that going to change anytime soon? I doubt it, because what you're going to talk about is insurance risk and catastrophic failure and uninsurable merchandise. And I don't care who backs me up. I can't afford to have my tanker sunk or damaged or have any of my crews hurt. So we have a real issue that no one's talking about, which is, okay, let's move these vessels through the strait. Let's take out the oil that's on those vessels. Well, now we've dumped that into the market, but we're still missing 13 million barrels a day. Why are we missing it? Because you got to produce it, get it to the dock, load it on the Aframax, and get it out of the strait. Even if the strait itself is opened up, if vessels are not coming back in at the same number of vessels back and forth, you're not picking up another 13 to 15 million barrels a day. there is an incomplete discourse between reality and what the media wants everyone to see. Now, the other question is, you say to yourself, okay, let's just assume there's no outbound crude oil that can come out of the strait because we don't have enough inbound vessels to pick up the new oil, to load it and get it back out again. And we have this continuation of everything's okay. We have an MOU signed. Now we're back to shooting missiles. Now the president said this morning, I don't trust them. The entire trade or MOU deal and peace talks are off. I don't trust them. They're liars. Okay. So we don't have a deal now. We've moved a lot of vessels out of the outbound lanes out, and they got out into open water. New vessels are not coming in. So what do we have? We still have the same problem we had before. We have 13 to 20 million barrels that's missing. Okay, so I simply asked the question, well, where is that 13 million barrels coming from? Who has 13 to 20 million barrels a day that was coming out of the Strait of Hormuz before the war started? Who can get that oil into the market? Now, there's particular pipelines. Well, maybe they can add 100 or 200,000 barrels a day because it wasn't at full capacity. Maybe there was, in a 36-inch diameter pipe, there might have been 6 inches left. They can add 100,000 barrels with compression. You can build a pipeline as fast as you want. That's not going to happen for 12 to 36 months. So really what you're seeing is you're seeing this almost like a recoil where there was this massive pressure of lack of oil. The soft barrels came out of the marketplace, and they came from storage and strategic petroleum reserves. They were oil that was loaded in pipelines. They were held in storage in tanks. They were sitting at the port. And the entire world scrambled, said, any oil that you have, get it into the market, including the United States, dump it into the market to keep oil prices down. Let's see if the president of the United States and the U.S. military can get this peace agreement in place to allow the Strait of Hormuz to flow again. And like I said before, even if it started flowing today, it's not going to solve the problem in the short term. You're missing 1.5 billion barrels of oil out of supply, but demand never really wavered. They're saying, oh, there's demand destruction. Very little, if any, demand destruction occurred. So there's some other countries that are not financially as well off as other particular Western countries, right? So maybe the taxi cab drivers didn't take as many fares. Maybe people went to work 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week. Well, the flip side of that is I look around, I see cranes everywhere. I see AI data centers. I see electrical consumption going on. I see highways are just as busy as they've ever been here in the United States. So what I'm seeing is very little, if any, demand destruction. And now that we've had this reprieve for the last 14 days, where oil prices dropped back into the 70s and 80s, even down to $68 a barrel yesterday, that didn't solve the problem of not having enough supply. So you have to ask yourself, what really is going on? So I pulled the screen up for you. This is called, coin market cap. I like to look at this because this is kind of what the market is saying forward looking, we think oil is going to be worth. Okay. It was up to like $147, $148 a barrel. It dropped down to about, I think it was around 109. No, it was about 104 yesterday. So they still were showing 104, even though oil was trading at $68. Because traders are trying to assume mathematically what really is the demand for crude oil, what is the supply, even though logistically and geographically it's coming from different sources. And with all that being said, what does it look like in terms of controlling the physical barrel to get it to the actual destination, get it to Japan and Europe and the Caribbean and get it to the necessary refineries, because raw oil has to go to someplace to be processed and refined. And if you're doing that logistically, you're doing it based on cost and source, the real question all of us have to ask is that if 13 million barrels a day is not being put back into brand new inbound vessels, you're still missing 13 million barrels a day. How many barrels can be made up by UAE? How many barrels can be made up by Argentina? How many barrels can be made up by Brazil? The U.S. is flatlined. We're at 13.7 million barrels a day. We need that. We've already taken most of our oil out of the SPR. You're going to get to a critical operational limit where you can't take any more out, because everybody says you have 400 million barrels in your strategic petroleum reserves, but 150, 200,000 million barrels will never come out because you have to maintain the caverns and the salt domes and the efficiency and the pipelines. It's like priming a pump dry. You can't do it. So that's kind of a false number. To me, it's like I used to tell my girls, I said, when you're at a half a tank, you're empty. You can't be on the highway as a single woman and break down. It's not safe for you. So half a tank is empty. Well, in the U.S. strategic petroleum reserves, 1/3 remaining oil means we're empty. We're empty, folks. There's not much oil to take out of the SPR without causing operational fundamental destruction, potentially, of those reserves and the salt domes and the caverns that we've stored it in. The same thing applies to the G7 strategic reserves. So today I'm going to tell you, watch this number, look at this site, coin market cap. I go from WTI pricing. I look at Brent. I don't care about the differential. What I care about is what it looks like at one basis or the other. And I look at the coin market because it kind of tells me the forward forecasting that traders are looking at. And there's going to be a wide spread, but it tells me direction. Traders are trying to trade in advance to get themselves a position to make an arbitrage. They're selling short like crazy because oil prices were going down. Now those guys that were short selling, hoping it was going to go down to 60 or below, are going, wait a minute, it's going the opposite way because now we have military action again. So now they're going to go long in their positions, and they're trading in and out of those positions. So the traders aren't really trading physical barrels for the most part. They're trading expectations on options and futures. But those traders that have physical barrel firm contracts to deliver that physical oil, they're going to look at the month of July, today being what, July the 8th, and you're going to see them get real busy about the 20th of this month in July saying, okay, this has all been fun and games. I still owe that refinery 100,000 barrels of physical oil. I have to buy it. You could see a real spike here in the next 7 to 10 days where oil could jump $20, $30 a barrel when they say all is well and good. We still are missing 13 million barrels a day. And I don't see any solution because the inbound traffic to the Strait of Hormuz does not exist. Food for thought. This is not being played out in empirical data. It's subjective wishing by political pundits, financial so-called gurus getting on the squawk box telling you everything's A-OK, kumbaya, and they don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. I listened to them and I laughed saying, you have no clue what you're talking about. The United States added about 14 drilling rigs. We're slightly above the number of active rigs before the war started 4 months ago. What does that mean? The oil and gas experts, the companies that drill and produce oil or increase or decrease exploration activity said, we don't believe it's a sustainable price, not because we don't believe the true supply demand market for oil is not going to increase, or there's going to be a differential between the necessary supply and the increasing demand. What they're saying is we don't believe fundamentally the financial benefits of adding more rigs is going to be in our best favor. Let's just put it blunt. If I control the U.S. oil and I'm making 13.7 million barrels a day and I see demand going up and supply having disruption around the world, why would I drill more wells? I'd rather actually go down. I'd rather go down to 13 million barrels a day instead of 13.7 million barrels a day and have you pay me $110 a barrel. I make more money. And when I can see that as a consistent pattern 6 months, 12 months in advance, guess what? I might add a few rigs. Why? Because I got too much profit. I got too much cash. Well, okay, I'll add a couple more rigs because I don't want to pay taxes on it. But we're not a dumb industry. And the industry says clearly there is no support from the government, the president, or any of the financial individuals that are controlling the markets, Besant, the whole 9 yards, that says we're going to support U.S. oil and gas exploration. The U.S. oil and gas industry says we're not going to increase. The globe can increase. We have been under financing and investing capital in the U.S. and global oil and gas industry to the tune of $2 to $4 trillion for the last 15 years. And that Pied Piper is going to get paid. And that day of payment's coming sooner than you think. Not to mention all the geopolitical risks going on between China and everything else across the world. This is a powder keg. And I can't tell you when it's going to go off, but it's going to go off. When that powder keg occurs, you can see oil jump $50 to $150 a barrel sometime in the near future, call it 5 to 8 years. Why? Everything statistically is suggesting we have a major differential between expectations of supply being available at a given price and the reality of the supply or the supply limitations and what it really costs to get that supply. Thanks for listening.